Hey lore lovers, my name's Eric with the Lorebrarians YouTube channel, and welcome to part 2 of the plane of Kaladesh Explained. In this video, we'll rewind the clock and travel back into the history of the plane, learning about the forces that shaped Kaladesh into what it has become today. We'll also examine the characters of Kaladesh and the story arcs that unfold on the plane. If you haven't already, be sure to check out part 1, which covers the topography of the plane and the races, cultures, and ideologies that can be found on Kaladesh. I'll provide a link to that video in the description below. Alright, let's dive in. Kaladesh is suffused with mana and energy that interacts with all things on the plane in the form of ether. Ether is abundant and even visible on Kaladesh, shaping the clouds of the ether sphere as well as the plants and animals on the surface below. Despite the raw magical energy that flows through Kaladesh, it is very rare to find an individual who can actually harness it. The plane has a shockingly low number of natural-born mages that can call on the mana of Kaladesh to fuel powerful spells and drive progress. To adapt and advance, the earliest civilizations relied heavily on the work of artifice. With few wizards or spellcasters to create magical breakthroughs, trinkets, constructs, contraptions, and the genius behind them became paramount to the growth and development of society. Invention was required to make peace, create weapons of war, and build civilization from the ground up. And so, in the earliest days of history on Kaladesh, inventors and their creations were heavily relied on to create and expand developing societies. The need for artifacts due to the lack of mages has created a plane in which all view innovation, invention, and craft as the most important and defining aspects of life. This philosophy has survived the years as today's Kaladesh is a hub for ingenuity, creativity, and master crafting. As civilization harnessed artifice and progressed, dozens of kingdoms, duchies, and principalities developed across Kaladesh. Culture and virtue seems to be tied with nationality rather than race on Kaladesh, whose many races appear to harbor no discrimination or ill will against one another, and who frequently interact with each other. Each country struggled desperately with its neighbors to maintain superiority, and war was frequent across the land. Sabotage, espionage, and subversion were common within the courts of kings and rulers. As the web of intrigue developed in Kaladesh society, nobles began to vie for political superiority in more ways than one. Soon, contests took place between political opponents as they sought each other's fortunes. One such contest was that of the court inventors. Kaladesh always prized innovation and clever thinking, so the court inventor was a glorified and valuable position. In the demonstration of innovation, as it was called, two inventors were tasked with solving a mechanical problem in an allotted amount of time. The inventors would present their creations at a grand banquet to be judged by members of the court. The noble whose inventor was judged superior would gather influence and political clout. Despite the outcome, this contest deepened the connection between inventors who would share their ideas with one another and innovate in cooperation. An incident lost to time launched 11 rulers into a fight over a large swath of coastal territory. This war would last a decade and ravage much of Kaladesh's lands. But the bond created between court inventors and nurtured by the demonstrations of innovation proved stronger than the conflict, and many inventors maintained channels of open discourse and diplomacy amongst each other. This proved vital in ending the bloody conflict. They negotiated terms of peace and settled on a new form of government, one in which a consulate of representatives from each of the 11 nations would meet to deliberate on political policy. The capital city of this newly created nation would be called Girapur. The 11 court inventors who brokered peace between the nations became the first consuls, or enlightened keepers. The guidance of these magnificent minds ushered in an era of ingenuity and creativity that is still very much part of Girapur's culture today. Their policies and laws attracted people from all over who sought to make new lives for themselves free from oppression and squabbling nobility. Eventually, the consulate and their city of Girapur grew so influential that they absorbed the last remnants of old principalities, whose petty squabbling faded into history. The significance of the 11 and their inventive spirit is an integral part of the culture of Girapur, whose consulate is still led by 11 of the greatest minds, and whose technological marvels can be seen across all of the city's 11 districts. The genius of artifice on Kaladesh is far beyond many other planes of the multiverse, but even the most ambitious and prophetic inventors couldn't break through the bottleneck of progress that plagued Kaladesh. Ether is abundant on the plane and has the potential to be a limitless source of energy to power progress in technology, but for hundreds of years, etherologists were unable to create a safe and effective means of harnessing such energy. Without ether as a power source, the creations of inventors stagnated, and they could not realize the potentials they dreamed of. That is, until a humble inventor named Avati Vyad discovered a breakthrough that would reverberate through the plane. Nearly 60 years from the present, Wyatt developed a way to refine raw ether and transform it into a clean, powerful, and unlimited source of energy. The discovery of ether refinement has led to an ongoing period of technological renaissance and promise that has swept all across Kaladesh, known as the Great Aether Boom. Ether is now the foundation for creation and invention, powering all works of artifice from the mundane to the truly spectacular. The greatest minds of Kaladesh continue to devise more ways to put ether to use, and the title of inventor has become even more distinguished. An air of intellect, hope, and progress surrounds Ghirapur and Kaladesh at large, an echo of Ghirapur's foundation and the work of the 11. Now, ether is collected from spires that reach pointed fingers to the heavens to pierce the ether sphere, and siphoned by thopters and skyships that soar through the skies. As the ruling body of Ghirapur, the consulate has taken upon itself the responsibility of supplying precious ether to all of its citizens. Huge networks of tubes, tunnels, and viaducts interconnect throughout the city and bring the life force of invention to thousands. In order to provide such a large-scale public work, the consulate has brought into being a seemingly interminable list of codes, statutes, and bylaws to regulate the collection and distribution of ether throughout Ghirapur. Although their vision is stated as providing all citizens with equal access to ether and invention, consulate enforcement of laws has done just the opposite. Rather than flow freely, ether is now tied up in an endless stream of bureaucratic red tape, with many getting more than their fair share, and countless more getting no ether at all. The corruption and ineffective leadership of the consulate, especially concerning ether, has spawned a progressive ideology that is sweeping through Ghirapur like wildfire: the philosophy of the renegades. The renegade mantra states that ether is everywhere. This simple and profound statement encapsulates everything about the renegade cause. They believe ether is a natural and integral part of life on Kaladesh, and that invention is at the core of their beings as citizens of the City of Wonders. They see the control of ether and knowledge as antithetical to the very foundation of Ghirapur. The consulate, with all of its laws, corruption, and bureaucracy, is seen as a symbol of oppression to the renegades, and they have chosen to live lives in violation of such laws. The extent to which renegades oppose consulate rule varies from minor affronts, like the premeditated oversight of rules or regulations governing inventions, to the more severe and open attacks on consulate government buildings, ether stores, and bureaucrats. Many renegades take a stance of philosophical opposition to the consulate, while many more take a stance of physical opposition. They actively sabotage consulate works and often paint the symbol of the renegades, known as the Leaking Spire, on government buildings and works of artifice. Two of the most notorious renegades were the couple Pia and Kiran Nalar, parents to the now planeswalker Chandra Nalar, who believed creation was the ultimate form of self-expression and freedom, and that the consulate's tight grip on ether was choking the life out of Kaladesh. Chandra viewed her parents as heroes and desperately wanted to follow suit. When she was old enough, she attempted to smuggle ether for the renegades, but was thwarted by consulate enforcer Captain Baral, who had been tracking the criminal Nalars. Cut off from a getaway and with no other options, Chandra's rage and fear boiled within until they were unleashed in a fiery tempest of pyromancy. To her astonishment, Chandra realized she was a natural-born mage on Kaladesh and escaped Baral's forces. The Nalars retreated to the outskirts of Ghirapur, but were pursued by Baral, who burned an entire village to ash and killed Chandra's father Kiran. The young Nalar was framed for the burning and captured by consulate forces to be executed. With her father dead and her mother believed to be the same, Chandra nearly resigned herself to death. But a wave of anger and resentment unlocked something deep inside her. Chandra's planeswalker spark ignited, and she vanished from Kaladesh in an inferno. Years later, the consulate and the renegades are still very much at odds. To say tension exists between government and governed is a gross understatement. A spark is the only thing needed to ignite the flames of opposition into open rebellion, and it is at this pivotal moment in history that the story of Kaladesh unfolds. After their actions against the Eldrazi Titans on Zendikar and Innistrad, the Gatewatch is approached by Dovin Bond, a Vidalcan planeswalker from Kaladesh, who is Chief Inspector and the head of security for Ghirapur's upcoming Inventors Fair. He requests their aid in dealing with a mysterious rogue that threatens the fair and the lives of thousands. The Gatewatch doesn't want to intervene, believing this to be a local issue, but on hearing them mention that her home plane may be in danger, Chandra returns to Kaladesh with Nissa and Liliana. The Inventors Fair is a yearly celebration of the greatest minds and most grand creations that the plane has to offer, and it fills the planeswalkers with wonder. As they move through the crowds, they spot a mysterious cloaked figure and believe it to be the threat Dovin mentioned. They tail their target to the Ether Hub, the central ether distribution center for the city, and the perfect target for sabotage. But they soon realize their target has quarry of its own, the infamous Renegade Prime. Pia Nalar. Chandra, in teary disbelief at the sight of her living mother, rushes in to embrace her. Their reunion is short-lived as the Planeswalkers discover they've walked right into a trap. The mysterious figure is none other than Tezzeret, a master artificer and planeswalker from Alara, who has brought Consulate Enforcers to capture Renegade Prime. Conflict breaks out, but the trio of planeswalkers are unable to save Pia, who is brought into custody as they make their escape. Word reaches Chandra from an old friend, Ovaya Pashiri, that her mother is held in the extensive underground network of tunnels on Kaladesh, and Pashiri leads Chandra and Nissa into the tunnels. They approach Pia's location only to find it empty. Seconds later, Consulate Enforcers march in from all directions, and a device known as a deadlock trap imprisons the trio. From the shadows emerges the figure of now Chief of Compliance Baral, burned and mutilated by his previous dealings with Pyromancer. Baral inflicts retribution by flooding the trap with poison before making his leave. Unable to escape without planeswalking, and unwilling to leave Pashiri behind, Chandra is prepared to die, but a massive figure cuts its way through Consulate automatons and breaks through the deadlock trap. The Leonin planeswalker Johnny Goldmane rescues the trio. Meanwhile, Tezzeret, who acts as head judge for the Inventors Fair, has called for the award ceremony and final exhibition of the fair. The elf Rashmi, who has developed a way of transporting inorganic matter through space, is crowned the winning inventor of the fair, and the final exhibition is revealed to be a fateful showdown of quicksmithing between the head judge himself and the imprisoned Pia Nalar. Meant as a show of the Consulate's power and planned as an execution of Renegade Prime, Tezzeret's plan is foiled when the newly arrived Gatewatch, no longer able to take a stand of indifference, jump from the crowd and defend the wounded Pia. A conflict breaks out between Planeswalkers and Consulate Enforcers, and in the ensuing chaos, Tezzeret absconds with the elf inventor Rashmi and her device. It's at this point that the truth and gravity of the situation is realized. The Inventors Fair was nothing but an elaborate ruse for Tezzeret and Consulate rulers to forcefully acquire all of the inventions on exhibition. Tezzeret himself has taken the most precious invention of all, Rashmi's device that allows for transportation of matter through space, and it is just the invention Tezzeret needs to create a powerful bridge between planes. In the ensuing confiscation coup, hundreds of inventions are taken and hundreds of civilians are imprisoned by the Consulate. Consulate peacewalkers and automatons are turned on the population to enforce a military crackdown. But this gross abuse of government power doesn't go without consequence. It buoys the ranks of renegades and wins the heart of the general population to their cause. A full-blown revolt sweeps through the city of Ghirapur. In the weeks that follow, the Gatewatch and renegades devise a plan to thwart Tezzeret's schemes, and the first step is to undermine his work on the Planar Bridge. Liliana and the native planeswalker Sahili Rai infiltrate the Consulate Spire and free the captured Rashmi, while Chandra, Pia, and the renegade forces score a critical victory by capturing the Aether Hub. With access to the city's ether supply, power has tipped into the renegade's favor. The second step is to power a device to deliver the crushing blow. Rashmi, Pia, and other inventors get to work creating a skyship and machine capable of destroying the Spire and Tezzeret's planar bridge. Chief Baral intervenes and uses himself as a distraction to lure Chandra and others away from the Aether Hub, and it's here where we see the difference between mother and daughter. Pia's revolution is predicated on the desire to build lasting change for the better on Kaladesh, whereas Chandra's revolution is based purely on revenge. Chandra falls for the bait and gives chase to Baral, leaving the hub vulnerable to recapture by the Consulate. With their ether supply gone, the Gatewatch strategy begins to dissolve. Despite this, they finish construction on the Heart of Kiran and load it with a Thopter carrying a device to disable the planar bridge. They have no way of getting the skyship past Consulate turrets and defenses with the few craft available to the renegades, so Jace conjures an illusion of an entire renegade fleet to disguise their approach. As they close in on the Spire, Liliana and others assault the bridge from the ground. The Necromancer, intent on murdering the Master Artificer, attacks Tezzeret and the two are locked in a deadly battle. In the hold of Heart of Kiran, Gideon and Chandra discover that Dovin Baan has stowed away and sabotaged their ether disruptor on the Hope of Ghirapur. With their plan quickly falling apart, Chandra and Gideon replace the disruptor with themselves and steer the Thopter straight into the planar bridge. Chandra unleashes a massive inferno of pyromantic energy while Gideon protects her with his invulnerability. The planar bridge is destroyed once and for all, but Tezzeret escapes and unbeknownst to the Gatewatch, planeswalks away with the core of the planar bridge integrated into his own artificial body. He returns to his master with the technology of creating another planar portal. It's now that the full scope of deceit and subversion becomes known to the Gatewatch. Tezzeret's presence on Kaladesh and manipulation of the consulate to acquire planar portal technology is a dark intimation of what his master Nicol Bolas has in store for the future. They realize it was never just about Tezzeret or Kaladesh, and in the hands of Bolas, Rashmi's invention could prove devastating. Ajani tells the Gatewatch of Bolas's bastion plane of Amonkhet, but warns them of attacking before they have gathered more Planeswalker allies. The group doesn't heed his warning, and they soon make way to Amonkhet. As for Kaladesh, the revolt comes to a tenuous peace, with the consulate returning confiscated items back to their inventors and loosening its restrictions on ether distribution. Pia and the Renegades have successfully given freedom and ingenuity back to the people who deserve it most, the citizens of Kaladesh. Thanks for watching part 2 of the Plan of Kaladesh Explained. Leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe for weekly content. I want to take a moment to thank all of those who support the channel, as we've recently crossed the 500 subscriber milestone. It means a lot, and I greatly appreciate the Magic the Gathering community. I look forward to keep developing the best content I can and cover more topics in the future. And now I want to hear from you. What do you think of the story of Kaladesh, and what are your biggest predictions for when we return to the Plane of Artifice? Let me know in the comments. I've linked the references used for this video in the description below. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.